All right, so the big thing here that I wanted to emphasize is, I know I said it a lot the last time, but I'll say it again. It's all, when we're talking about the cellular automata, it's all such simple rules. Like hilariously simple rules. It's hard to define a simpler system. And in spite of that, from these simple rules, you get really complex and interesting behavior. And I feel like, I know we asked this like another time, but like, raise your hand if you're reasonably familiar with chess as a game, right? So it's funny, I don't know. I feel like if I asked that question like 5 years ago, everyone would have their hand up. What's with kids these days? Come on, get back to chess. Well, anyways, with chess, what's interesting about chess, and a lot of games, and these are the types of games that I like. Why is this on still? There. Is when you have a game that has simple rules. The rules themselves are very easy to follow and understand. But from those simple rules, you get immense complexity. And that's where things are interesting. Like even if I'm playing like a video game with simple rules, but from those simple rules you derive immense complexity, that's way more interesting than complexity for the sake of complexity. And I have a feeling a lot of people in here know exactly what I mean when I say that about like some games. And like we talked about the cellular automata here, and patterns like this kind of seem to arise in nature. And then like Conway's game of life, if we go here, let's hit play on this one. Speed it up. Oh, well, this one. This one I feel as if it's metastable. Okay, this would be an example of something that's metastable, where, look, it's not that it's not moving. Things are moving, but it's like perfectly cyclical, right? It repeats. It's metastable. So it's not like this part right here is well, let's find another one. Like, see that little triangle bit? That's stable, it's not moving. But the whole thing is metastable because although it's moving, it's fixed. Is that clear what I mean by that? What's neat about this one is it lets you like, oh, come on, why can't I? Yeah, it lets you kind of, let's mess it up. Oh. So.
My favorite is the one that just got flying off.
Yeah. Again, based on the simplest set of rules, you can get really interesting complex behavior. And I can't stress it enough. It's so simple. We didn't need something immensely complicated to get this in the first place. Yet something immensely complex can come from this simple thing. And that's an important concept. Like this right here, I could build that. It's called a puffer. Like anything that's particularly noteworthy, people will take note of it. There's like a wiki for all the different initial conditions you can create. And yeah, this one's called a puffer, and this is what it generates. And it'll go on forever, which is really interesting. And what's wild about Conway's game of life is you can, I want to be very clear. The basis, the fundamental basis, the rules. These are the rules given a 2D grid where each value, each cell in the grid could have one of two states, on or off. Here are the rules. There are 4 rules. Any live cell with fewer than 2 live neighbors dies. Any live cell with 2 or 3 survives. Any with more than 3 dies. And any dead cell with exactly 3 live neighbors becomes alive. That's it. Those are the rules. Hilariously simple. And yet with this, I can create logic gates. What's this one here? This looks like this website's been updated. Okay, let's see if we can find, okay, glider collisions. So here is a NOT gate. So what do we have here? We have 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. The NOT gate. This gate takes a single input stream from the northwest. I guess that's here. And sends output to the northeast. Well, this is a, look, nothing's coming in. It's not, right? So nothing's coming in here. But the output is on. It's not. I'm guessing this is an example of input comes in and no output. It's not. Okay? Something comes in, nothing goes out. Nothing comes in, something goes out. Cool? That's not. We can also do AND. All right, I guess we're okay. They're just idly waiting for some stream to come in either from the northwest or southwest. So it looks like northwest or southwest are the inputs. 1 and 2 are the inputs. There's no input to this AND gate. And where's the output? The output is 9. Where's 9? That would likely like to exit, but there's no way outside the interaction. So which way does it want to exit? I'm guessing southeast. So now we have 1 input's coming in, but no other input. And we all know that with AND, that means there should be no output, right? Okay, yeah. And then finally, when we have 2 inputs coming, let's see what happens. 2 inputs that are 1 are coming. And there we go. It's producing output. If you're thinking to yourself like, okay, I guess it's like a logic gate. No, it literally is. This is performing the function of AND. Here's OR. I'm guessing that's both off. So here's, I don't know, 1's on. Let's speed it up. Yeah, I'm guessing that's the output. I'm guessing this is no input. So we're not going to really see anything here. But it can produce OR. What can, if we have, who here's taken 263? So if we have the ability to do NOT, AND, and OR, what can we do?
A lot. I think, can't you specifically do XOR?
Yeah, and what else? Pardon? NAND, yeah. What else can we do? If we can do NAND, what else can we do? Addition, subtract, literally anything we do with the computer. All you need to build a computer, all you really need to build a computer is a universal gate. And a universal gate would be like NAND or NOR. But really, all you really need is NOT and AND, or NOT and OR, and you can build a computer. It's just easier if you have more options. But with NOT, AND, and OR, we can build a computer. Like literally, we can build a computer. It can do addition, it can do subtraction, It can play Doom. Well, have you met people? Here, let's turn off the audio because this is annoying. So here's Conway's game of life, right? You know, these are called gliders. So just watch this for a second, right? So with this, and we know we can make AND gates, we can make OR gates, right? And here we go, we can zoom out. So now it's just all about scale, right? So we're like zooming out here. And as we're zooming out, we're speeding up a little bit just so things don't take forever. Now, obviously, this is a very well-controlled system, but the system is still following all the rules that we observed already. Our universe is a very well-controlled system, except we just organize things a certain way to do tasks that we want. Like, we built computers. We muscled the rocks to do what we want. And so this people, they muscled Conway's game of life to do what they want. Does anyone see what's happening?
Conway's game of life to play Conway's game of life.
Yeah. If you can build a computer with Conway's game of life, that means you can absolutely implement Conway's game of life in Conway's game of life. And if you can implement Conway's game of life in Conway's game of life, obviously you can implement Conway's game of life in Conway's game of life in Conway's game of life. Forever, 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 forever. Like I hope you kind of get a sense. Like look, Conway's game of life is Turing complete. I hope you get a sense that with such basic rules, you can make a system that's so complex that it can recreate itself. Which is wild. Both Conway's game of life and Rule 110, let's go back to here, let's look at Rule 110. Oh. They're both Turing complete. You could just hack around with the initial conditions and then follow the rules, and you can generate something that's Turing complete. Both are hilariously, remarkably simple systems that can create remarkably complex and seemingly chaotic or random behavior. There's no intelligence behind the system itself. We can be intelligent about how we configure the initial conditions in the same way that we are intelligent enough to write a program, but the program just follows the rules that are already defined. So the system itself has no intelligence there. It's just following the rules based on the starting initial conditions. Both are Turing complete. They can perform any computation any other Turing computer can compute, just like a regular desktop computer. Now, has anyone here taken economics? Have you ever heard about the phrase the invisible hand?
Yeah.
You have, yeah. You know, it's wild. For those of you that don't know, now one thing we have to be very careful about is teleology, which is this idea that we have to be very careful about explaining things in terms of their purpose, as opposed to what actually caused them to happen, right? Like, we have two arms, okay? Why do we have two arms? Well, we have them to grab things. No, that's not why we have two arms. We get to grab things because we have two arms, but why do we have two arms? Well, think of the millennia of evolution and things that had to have changed. The start of any living species to have two arms was not to be like, we're going to do this with the goal of being able to grab things. No, that's ridiculous. That's a stupid statement. So we have to be very careful about this idea of teleology, where, yeah, it's important not to explain things. Look, if I made a fork, well, yeah, I made a fork to be a fork, fine. But when you look at any arbitrary system, we have to be careful about describing things in terms of their purpose rather than why they are there. Virtually nothing within the universe exists for a purpose, except, again, like things that we made for ourselves for a purpose. Things only exist because they don't not exist. And I know that sounds like an obvious statement, but make sure you understand the magnitude of a statement like that. Like, why is there that asteroid in space where you can go find it? Because it's there. No one put it, it's just there. Why? I don't know, because maybe it collided with another asteroid that put it on that trajectory. And why did it collide with that other trajectory? You got to go all the way back to some initial conditions and hit run on that simulation, and things end up where they end up. They didn't end up there because someone designed it. They ended up there because the system was just executing its rules, and there you go. Just like when I went to Conway's Game of Life, let's hit run. Let's restart. Let's refresh. It's clearly starting with like well-known, interesting things. No, how did I do that? I want to zoom out. How do I zoom out? Thanks. See, look. Why did that start going off? Why did that asteroid start flying out into space? I don't know, because shit happened here such that it went that way. I didn't design it to do that. It just happened and it followed the rules, and there we go. That's it. That's what I mean. Evolution has no intelligence guiding it. But things seem to work. But they only work because if they didn't, they wouldn't. If I wasn't able to digest food, I'd die. And yet here we are going like, isn't it miraculous? Wow, we can digest food. Thank God we digest food so we can live. No, because if we couldn't digest food, we couldn't sustain our energy and we'd die. That's it. Why does a rock not have arms? Because it never, like, what? Like, because it doesn't. If it feels like I'm saying things that are like, yeah, no shit, this is obvious, make sure you're not thinking about what I'm saying superficially. Make sure you're actually grasping these concepts, because this is very important. The invisible hand is this idea that, you know, there's no, look at like our system of like economics and government, right? You know, we do everything we can. There's some amount of control. And people set out to do certain things. But, like, there's a famous essay that you all should read. It's not very long. It's pretty short. It's a famous essay. And for those that have taken economics, maybe they made you read it. I don't know. But it's an essay called I, Pencil. Have you heard of this one? No? Okay, who here knows how to make a pencil? No, you don't.
Kind of.
No, you don't. Kind of is a very different statement. Can you go make a pencil? Who can go make a pencil? Pardon?
Do you have the ingredients?
No.
No, probably not.
Yeah. Because as soon as you go like, well, you just need to get the wood. Well, how do you get the wood? Well, you go cut down a tree. Okay, how'd you do that? Okay, you get a tool to cut down a tree. Well, how'd you get the tool? Think of all of the people and all of the jobs that need to happen in order for this marker to be right here. It had to get transported to me. How did it get transported to me? Well, someone built the truck. How'd they build the truck? How'd they get the gas to fuel the truck? How did they get the pieces in here? How did they get the chemicals to make this work? We could play this game forever. And obviously you go like, okay, you're being obnoxious. Obviously this gets arbitrarily complex. The sum of this parts is, sure, it's just a marker. But think of all of the things that needed to come together to make this marker. And if you're like, yeah, okay, he's being silly. But literally that had to happen. Someone needed to discover, first of all, that, I don't know, what is it, like these use, like benzene or something? I can't remember. All of the different things that went into this, the plastic, the oil, the refinery process to make gasoline, the transportation of the gasoline to go into the fuel pumps that needed to be built in order to fuel the transportation truck that got this here. The rubber in the tires of that truck. All of that shit was necessary for this marker to get here right now. All of that. And I'm not being obnoxious. It had to happen. But the person who worked in the oil field wasn't sitting there that day going like, right now I'm working so that pencil or that marker can be on that desk at St. FX. No. They had no goal of getting this marker here. They didn't give a shit. And yet it's here. There's this invisible hand that is making everything work through forms of incentive and whatnot. There's no one single entity directing this. No one directed all of the things that needed to come together to get this marker here. And yet it's here. And then you're going to say, well, yeah, more than one person needed to do it. Yeah, a shit ton more than one person. A lot more than one person. People that are dead today were involved in one way or another of how to do this. The person that discovered oil, I don't think they're around anymore, but they were important. The person who discovered on how to smelt iron, yeah, they were important for this. They're not around anymore. There's a shit ton of people involved, dead and alive, that were necessary for this to be here right now. And none of them had the goal of getting this marker here. And yet here it is. If you say, well, yeah, you bought the marker. Who got that marker at the store? Who built that store? We could play this game forever. And I know you're thinking, yeah, we could play this game forever. Ha, ha, ha. Do you really understand what, you clearly don't understand what I'm saying, because there were people that were involved in that process. A lot of people that didn't give a shit that this marker was here right now. The only person I think that really cares that this marker is here right now is me, because I'm using it as an example. And yet here it is. We've used this example already. I want to train a robot how to walk. Deep learning is a terrible idea for finding the best way to train a robot on how to walk. It's not going to work. As artificial neural networks grow in size, the number of parameters, the number of dials you have to turn grows insanely rapidly. We get that combinatorial explosion thing. Yet, something interesting happens. As the number of parameter grows, it seems that the number of good enough configurations also grows, which is a good thing, right? Did this marker get here the best way possible? No. Was there another way for this marker to get here? Yeah, I'm certain of it. Did it matter that there may have been a better way to get this marker here? No, it didn't matter. All that mattered is that it's here. Does it matter that I might not be if you take every human on the planet and sort them by walking ability, I'm probably not at the front of that list. Does that matter? No, because here I am. I'm walking around. I made it here today. So, even the goal of finding the best is sometimes, like, I mean, us as humans, we are so obsessed with like categorizing things. We're so obsessed with like finding the best way and optimizing things, which is a good thing, right? We like that. We like to optimize things, ultimately, reduce the inputs to produce the outputs. We love doing that. We're obsessed with that. And that's actually given us quite a lot in life. But the universe doesn't give a shit. It's just doing its thing. Any questions about any of that? I know it sounds like, ooh, but I am making points that are important to make sure you grasp. You should read this essay. Here, you can find it right here, free ebook, written in 1958. It's not long. I pencil. It's a pencil talking about how immensely complex it is and how you don't know how to do it. Yeah, any questions or anything? All right. Overview. So now that we know how evolutionary algorithms work, let's talk about how evolutionary algorithms work. Given a population of individuals within an environment with a limited number of resources, competition for those resources necessarily occurs. And this competition creates some form of selection, and this causes the overall fitness of a population to rise. Okay? A population has an ability to persist and grow or whatever. There's a limited number of resources. They're going to have to compete. Those that can compete better are going to be better off, and those that compete worse are going to be worse off. And so if I want to outcompete somebody else, I need to outcompete somebody else. And then if they want to outcompete me, and I've already tried to outcompete them, they need to then outcompete me. And we create this evolutionary arms race. It's going to happen. That's what evolutionary computation is. We're basically tricking the system into making itself compete to find good solutions. In the context of evolutionary computation, given some problem and a mechanism for measuring a solution's quality, the problem is the environment. Generate a fixed population size of solutions to the problem. The fixed population size is one way of limiting the resources in the environment. There's a fixed population. Evolutionary algorithms don't necessarily have to have a fixed population. You can kind of enforce this, like these limits other ways. Apply some quality measure to the solution, like a fitness function. More fit solutions reproduce to fill the next generation, the population. And more fit individuals compete better. More fit individuals are more likely to be selected and produce offspring. And that's where we get this, right? This whole initialize, let me zoom out. Initialize, evaluate, select variation, evaluate, select variation, evaluate, select variation, repeat, 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 until we say, okay, I'm done. That's it. There are two really big and important forces at play, variation and selection. Variation, that's your genetic operators like mutation and crossover. They increase population diversity, and they are really good at pushing a population towards novelty, something new, an area of the search space that hasn't been explored yet. And selection, well, that's surviving within the population. And it decreases a population's diversity and pushes the population towards what's like known to already be good, something of high quality that we are already kind of aware of. Now, I have to be very careful not to say that these things are exclusively one or the other. Selection goes towards like exploit what's good, and variation drives towards novelty and diversity. It's not that simple. All of these things are interconnected and complex. Depending on the selection and genetic operators, you're always going to end up in some point between diversity and like exploration and exploitation. No matter what you pick, you're always going to be somewhere in here. It's very complex. But these are the key forces at play. There are a lot of different types of evolutionary computation out there. Evolutionary computation is a really big umbrella term. And as we've already made clear, hell, from that image up there, evolutionary computation is simply a hilariously high-level idea. It's just a framework. How you go and you make specific design and implementation decisions will have big effects on how your algorithm works. Now, sky's the limit. You can do whatever the hell you want as long as you're loosely following that framework. However, people have come along and be like, okay, yes, there's that high-level framework, but if we kind of like narrow it down where we do this here and this here and this here and this here, and how you do these things is still up to you. But like as soon as we start to like narrow down some of the ideas, that's when you start to fall into subcategories, like a genetic algorithm, for example. All genetic algorithms are a form of evolutionary computation. Not all forms of evolutionary computation are genetic algorithms. There's a lot more. GAs, they typically have string or array list encodings. Typically. There's 1,001 exceptions. Evolutionary strategies, well, this is another form of evolutionary computation that work really well with real numbers. Genetic algorithms, they don't really work very well with like floating point numbers. Differential evolution, they work well with real numbers too. And what's really neat about differential evolution, and I always found this like a really interesting naming convention, because differential evolution does not require that your search space needs to be differentiable. So you'd think it would be called like non-differentiable evolution, but whatever. Basically, you don't need a gradient to like guide the search, okay? Particle swarm optimization. This is a very different form of evolutionary computation, but it is evolutionary computation, but it's very different than these ones. And this is an idea that we will learn a little bit about later in the course. But particle swarm optimization is great for real numbers. Evolutionary programming, that's you evolve finite state machines, which is really interesting. And genetic programming, this evolves programs, which is really interesting. Imagine I told you, write a function to do X, Y, Z. And you're like, I don't want to. But what I'll do is, what if I make like a GA? What if I use evolution to write that function for me? Yeah, that's genetic programming. It's pretty crazy if you ask me. And these use an encoding that's more of a tree structure, which is really interesting. And this list is hilariously not exhaustive. The list, I could be here for days to go over all the different subcategories, but these are some popular ones. Components. Evolutionary computation, it's remarkably modular, so you can do really whatever the hell you want. You can add more ideas to that simple like initialize, evaluate, select, variation, and then termination. You could add additional ideas all you want. All that really matters is that you're following the loose idea. So you can do whatever you want, and the core components are always talked at a very high level. Your representation, that's how we are encoding a solution to the problem. The genotype is the encoding. The phenotype is what the encoding means. All right, we've talked about this already. The genotype, that is a chromosome. The phenotype, that's a candidate solution. But as I warned you before, people use those words interchangeably all the time. I do too, for better or worse. So going back to that bit string example, the phenotype space is the unsigned integer 18, 2, 9. But the encoding, the genotype space, that's the actual bit strings. Cool? Cool. You have an encoding and decoding process as well, which is nice. The more similar these are, the more similar what the phenotype and what the encoding are is more, we would say that's a more direct representation, but you can have very indirect representations. Like think of traveling salesperson problem. Your encoding could literally be like, well, what is the order of the cities you visit? Yeah, that's fairly straightforward. That's a fairly direct encoding, a very direct encoding. The encoding and what it means are very similar. But you can come up with wild encodings where, what if your encoding is, well, no, you start with, like if I have 100 cities, you start with 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 99. But your encoding is shuffles. Shuffle these two, then shuffle these two, shuffle these two, shuffle these two. So like you basically have the starting one that you manipulate to get to a new path, a new Hamiltonian cycle. Yeah, that's a weird indirect representation. You can do whatever the hell you want. Candidate solution, phenotype, And individual are words used to describe a possible solution to a problem. And genotype and chromosome are words used to describe an encoding. However, again, people, myself included, misuse these all the time. Usually you'll hear candidate solution used as like a catch-all most of the time. Sometimes you'll hear chromosome used as a catch-all, but typically this is more of the catch-all. But be aware that as long as you're familiar with the context, you'll probably be fine. A locus, position, gene, and allele are words used to describe a part of a chromosome. Although this jargon is actually not really used in practice, but like if I had the phenotype 5 and I was encoding it with binary, I would be like, well, this is a specific gene or allele or locus or whatever. Like these are all words to mean like, oh, an individual spot. Right? This whole thing is the chromosome, and one like piece of information within the chromosome is like a gene, let's say. No one uses these words though in practice, so I'm just letting you know here for completeness, but in practice we're probably not going to be using these words very often. It's ideal to ensure, yeah, here we go. When it comes to deciding on your representation, your encoding, there's a couple of things we want to balance. Well, one thing we don't really want to balance, one thing we want to make sure we are absolutely doing is we want to make sure all possible valid solutions can be represented in the genotype space. We don't want to come up with an encoding that can't represent a chunk of solutions. I should be careful with that actually. We don't want to design an encoding that excludes a bunch of solutions where we know a good solution could exist. It's fine if we eliminate chunks of solutions where we go like, well, yeah, there's no way a good solution's over there, so screw it. Once we see examples, more concrete examples, this will be a little easier to talk about. Constraining the search space by eliminating inadmissible solutions can greatly improve performance. We're going to see examples of this as we go. What the encoding for a given problem should is not always, there's a typo. Does anyone know how to use GitHub reasonably well? No one? Well, you better hurry up and learn it because we're going to be using it. Really, no one wants a free PR to feel as if they're contributing? Let's fix that typo. Submit a pull request to fix that typo. I'll merge it. And you get to be like, hey, I'm a hero. If you don't fix it, and I see it tomorrow, I'm going to be very sad, at you specifically. A clever encoding can drastically improve the results of an algorithm. And we have a whole topic on encodings a little later, so don't worry too much about how vague this is at this point. People can get like a PhD in computer science by just talking about a new encoding for a problem. Like that, this is a big thing. It's a big deal. Fitness and fitness functions, well, this is a measure of like goodness of a candidate solution. Really, we use a fitness function on a chromosome that is indicative of a candidate solution's like goodness, right? That's what we want. To get a little bit more precise with my wording. The fitness function is a mechanism for measuring a candidate solution's fitness or goodness. This is what the population is trying to adapt to. What the fitness function should be is not always straightforward. Like representation, the choice can have a huge impact. And we saw, like with the bit string optimization, what is the actual integer number or how many ones and zeros there are, two very different fitness functions, and it has an impact. Yeah. Although both fitness functions worked, the fitness functions, it did impact performance. And it altered how our search space can kind of move through this, or sorry, how our algorithm can move through the search space. A population is a collection of chromosomes. Each chromosome would have a fitness associated with it. The population typically has a fixed size, which is the limited resource for the candidate solutions to compete for. Over time, the population's average fitness should improve. If not, you're probably doing something wrong. Diversity, a measure of how different the candidate solutions are within the population. If you ask, just like if you ask, like, well, how do you measure fitness? And I go like, that's up to you. If you say, how do you measure diversity? That's up to you. It's often helpful to think about a population evolving rather than individuals. Obviously, the individuals are changing, but if you look back, if you take a step back and look at the whole population, it's all kind of changing. And there will be like patterns and trends that start to take over the whole population. Like imagine TSP, and one of the candidate solutions finds like a really good subpath. Like, you know, it seems really good to always go from city like A, B, C to D. It's always really good to do that. Next thing you know, a lot of the members of the population are going to take on that trait, right? So the populations, even though an individual might like discover something that's good will start to get passed to other members of the population over time. So the population's fitness like will change. Okay, each chromosome. Yeah. One thing I'll note, just as an aside, the first time I started like writing genetic algorithms, like 10 plus years ago. I don't know that, oh man, I'm pushing like 15 years ago. You know, I was trying to be like oh, I'm going to code this so well. I'm going to make like a candidate solution object, or sorry, like a chromosome object, and the chromosome object will have like its encoding, and it'll have its fitness value associated with it, and then inside that I'll have like a population object that will store the collection of, no, keep it simple. Just use like a list, right? Just that's it. Like just use a list. Like, oh, your population, it's a list. You don't need to make your own object for that. Keep it simple. Don't over-engineer things. Oh, how am I going to store each chromosome's fitness? I need to have it associated with. Just use an ordered list where I have a list that's the population, then I have a list that's the fitness. And then the thing in index 0 is fitness is in index 0 of the fitness list, and so on and so on and so on. Just keep it simple. Don't over-engineer these things. You'll just slow it down, and you don't want to do that. Selection. This is the mechanism for like saying who does and does not make it to the next generation. And not only who does and does not, but who also gets a chance to like have the variation operators applied. Selection, it's stochastic, but probabilistic in the sense that, yeah, it's like there's randomness involved, but we want those that are more fit to be more likely to be picked. How more likely? Well, that's a dial we have to tune. There are many ways to do this. Two remarkably popular ones are, we already saw tournament and roulette wheel we kind of talked about. We will go into more detail on these later. Generational versus steady state. As always, there's always like, evolutionary computation is just, I've said it a billion times, I'm going to say it a billion more times. It's just a high-level framework. So how you go and you implement all this stuff is entirely up to you. We have something called like generational and steady state. I recommend generational. I find it easier and it works really well. But steady state is a little different, where here's the two core ideas. And this does have a pretty significant impact on your search. It's like a core component. Generational will have very discrete generations, where you say like, okay, here's my population, evaluate everything, select, put them over here, okay, we're done, okay, we've got our new population, apply the genetic operators, okay, yeah, great, now, okay, repeat. Then it's the next generation, right? That's generational. Steady state, on the other hand, is different. It doesn't have discrete generations. It'll do things where like with the generational, we'll make like a new population for each generation. With steady state, you have one population. You might pick two, mix them together, pull them apart, and put them back. And then do it again. There's no discrete transition between generations. If you say what generation you're on, you're going to say that's not an option. That's really not a question. So steady state, it's a little different. Some people like it. I don't. I kind of like generational. Now what do we have here? Steady state does not have discrete generations. Instead, they operate continuously on a single population. They select candidate solutions for reproduction and select candidates for replacement. Right, so this is another thing too, is the example I just used for steady state is I didn't actually have a separate selection. Usually what you do is you select 2 that are good. Maybe they are having mutation and crossover applied to them. Maybe not, whatever. I pick 2 that are good. Now I need to put them back in the population. What do? Do I replace the 2 I just took out? Or maybe I should go find like the shittiest ones, kick them out, and then put them in and replace them. There's like another selection strategy that would need to be decided upon if you're doing steady state. Who gets selected, and then who gets selected to like reproduce and or just continue to exist, and who gets selected to get replaced. So there's another selection strategy as well. So here we go. Well, what does this figure say? Example of a round of selection occurring in a steady state evolution algorithm. The list represents a population and individual letters represent individual chromosomes. Here, chromosome B and E, green, are selected for reproduction, and chromosome E and I, red, are selected for replacement. So let's say I've got B and E. I selected them. They produce some offspring, X and Y. They replace the 2 that were selected for replacement. That's all. Variation operators. You know what? We'll pick up here because this one's a little long and involved. So we will continue here Friday. Any questions before we actually go? Yes?
That typo, will I try updating that so you can send the update?
Did you submit a pull request?
Yeah.
All right, well, then I'll see it. And if I'm happy, I'm going to merge it. Did you do it?
Not yet.
Haha, he beat you. But I'm going to look at it, and if it's not right, I'm going to reject it. Yeah. But if it's good, good. If I look at it and it didn't quite fix it, I'll just fix it myself. But thank you nevertheless.
And let me know.
Yeah, well, you'll see.